So today we're going to do a K&N cold air intake install on this 2002 Porsche 911 C2 Carrera. This is an off-the-shelf K&N kit. The only thing we've done so far is partially assemble the heat shield, which you can see here. It's a full replacement for the factory airbox, which goes from here to here. The first components you're going to have to remove to get the airbox out are this 13mm bolt into the chassis. You're going to take the oil fill tube out of this pressure clip just by pulling upward, and you're also going to unclip the mass airflow sensor simply by pressing in to both sides of the plug with your finger and pushing out. You also need to undo this 6mm hose clamp with a nut driver or a standard screwdriver. Once you've done that, the box lifts out of the car. Just make sure to pay careful attention to not rip any of the rubber components of the car while you're doing that. So we have the airbox most of the way out. I undid this clip here that holds the MAF sensor plug in, but this one is hidden out of the way. The only thing you have to do to get this out is take the top portion of it in your finger and pull it toward you, and it will snap open, which is really hard to see. But there, the clip's open. That piece was just on top of this piece. Get that out of the way. Voila, airbox. So you're replacing a huge piece with a smaller piece. You really don't gain all that much performance with it, but you do gain some noise, and that's a welcome addition on this 996 C2. And here's what you see with the airbox out. When you're reassembling things, make sure this MAF cable stays kind of up there and not down there, because once you put the heat shield in, that's just going to get in the way. If any of the rubber grommets in the chassis rail stayed in the car, take those out. Those stay with the airbox. The K&N comes with new isolator units and hardware. So here's the view of the engine bay with the heat shield sitting in place. Down here you can see I've installed the K&N grommets into the car just to get the spacing correct so we can mark our hole here. There's one on this end here, right in the middle of the screen, and there's two on this end. This bracket here simply aligns to the factory hole. You will be using an isolator provided with the K&N kit there, but this side, there was no original hole there for the airbox. So what you want to do is take your Sharpie and draw a nice little pattern of where the hole is on the bracket, and then take the bracket back out of the car. So you can see my pattern that I made with the Sharpie. All we're going to do is try to center this as best we can, and then drill that hole out. So the intake snout of the factory airbox we retain and use with the K&N kit. In order to do that, use a standard screwdriver or something similar to push down the locking pin on the snout while pulling away. I think there's 4 of these, maybe more, maybe less, but that's the procedure that we found that worked pretty well for that. Just jam it in there and get your friend up, you pull the snout out, and then I'll show you what you're going to do with that, with the factory heat shield, sorry, the K&N heat shield and the factory snout. So this is what your factory airbox snout kind of looks like sitting in the K&N bracket. The only thing you really have to do here is drill out those 2 holes and then use the K&N supplied hardware to bolt the 2 pieces together. This actually doesn't serve that much of a function anymore. The cold air box that came in the car only draws air through this opening, and the K&N draws air through this entire opening and that. But it's included with the kit. They gave us hardware, so we're going to go ahead and install it anyway. So I just bolted the factory snout onto the K&N piece. In the instructions you get with this kit, it says to drill 3/8 inch holes in this plastic snout. I recommend you stick with the 1/4 inch we used on the sheet metal, because it's the perfect size for the hardware they gave you for this. So your mileage may vary, but I would use a 1/4 inch. At this point, all we're going to do is make sure our hardware is lined up correctly for the isolators, and then we're going to put this back in the car and start eyeballing things to make sure everything looks okay. So we installed the 3 larger bolts into the collapsible rubber grommets included with the K&N kit. That's what we're tightening down right now. Make sure to include the included washers, because I almost didn't. Right here, this is where we drilled the hole through. 4mm Allen metal washer, rubber washer. On the back, you need a small metal washer and a nylock nut included with the kit. On this side, it's a standard 4mm cap head screw, metal washer, rubber washer, and then there's already a threaded captured area included factory with the car. So all we're going to do, we've tightened these 2 down. We're going to tighten the 3, they're actually 12mm now, but we're using a 13. We're going to tighten those into the rubber grommets. Once that's done, we'll start going onto the main intake tube and filter. So K&N was nice enough to include a T20 safety Torx, which is a Torx with a pin in the middle. Just take out your original math, be very careful with it because they're very expensive and susceptible to shock damage. And then insert it into your K&N adapter plate with all included hardware. Make sure the nozzle, the snout, the open end of the MAF is facing the filter. So here we have that tube, we just put the mass airflow back in the car. When you're plugging this back in, you're going to notice that it doesn't feel like it's plugged in the correct way, but that's because the MAF is actually sitting a different direction in the car than it used to be, so that's fine. If you see this, whatever. Up here, K&N does include all new clamps. However, I'm a huge fan of the factory clamps, so I'm reusing all those I possibly can. I'm reusing the throttle body clamp, and then on the air filter I'm going to reuse the airbox clamp as well. So next step is to pop in the filter. It's pretty self-explanatory, but just kind of set it down on in there, put the clamp on it first, and then tighten it down. So here we have the filter installed with the K&N filter sock. You probably want to install that if you live in an area that it rains ever, because in through that fan, rainwater happens. Beyond that, last step, this is an included K&N clamp, not one you reuse. Thread it around this bracket with the noise isolator you installed earlier. Tighten it down, and you should be good. The only additional thing I would mention at this point before you go for a drive, unhook your battery as long as you don't have a radio with a code you don't have or some other weird thing like that, just to reset the ECU. So when you go for a drive, it starts relearning the air fuel tables a little bit more quickly. That way you get a little bit more power, a little bit faster. Oh, also, don't forget to snap that back down into the clamp. We didn't do that yet. If you choose to unhook the battery, it's just under the front trunk, 2 little quarter turn clips, and then a 10mm. So just leave that off for maybe 5 minutes, plug it back in, and then start her up and go for a drive.